What's up everyone, Vu of Vu Films, and I'm back with another idiotic video for you to watch. Today I have a new Sony fanboy item. Sony APS-C flagship Alpha 6600. And if you don't believe me, I will just go ahead and touch track that and you will see that it is the Alpha 6600 in my hands before B&H or Adorama could even ship it to anybody because, well, I have the Chinese connection, like Bruce Lee. And just in case you think it's fake, here is the box with that touch track action. Just showing off the fact that I just touched the box and it's tracking the box all the way back to my face. So with the Alpha 6600 here, I have a 35mm FE 1.8. There's actually a full frame design lens. It's because I shoot mainly on full frame Sony A7 III. Now today I want to compare these two cameras, especially now that this camera is a whopping $13.99, $1,400. If you know where to look, maybe you get it for $1,300 through the Chinese gray market, or this A7 III. Now it's running for $17.99, about $1,800 everywhere. But if you know where to look, you could probably get it to about $1,600 to $1,650 for the body. So the real difference between this camera, the crop sensor Alpha 6600, and a full frame sensor A7 III, pricing could be anywhere between $250 to $400. So let's say on average, the difference between the full frame and a crop is $300. Which one should you go for? I mean, for another $300, you get the full frame sensor, you get better dynamic range in photography, you get dual card slots. Well, it looks like I just answered the question. I feel like if photography is your thing, the easy answer would just to go for the full frame A7 III. Full frame sensor, better dynamic range. It was at 14 to 15 stops of dynamic range or whatever. The full frame lens selection, the versatility of, going into crop mode from full frame. All of those things are here. So if you're a photographer and you're looking into get into Sony and you're wondering if you just go for the crop sensor or the full frame sensor, at this point in time, definitely the A7 III, no questions about it. However, for video, there's more questions to be answered here. The Alpha 6600 makes a very strong case for videographers to use it instead of the Alpha A7 III. Why is that? Well, first of all, if you are a YouTube douchebag like myself, you have a flip out screen. And right now I'm using Alpha 6400 with the flip out screen to monitor my ugly face. So you have that, that's one, okay? But that's only strictly for like YouTube D-bags, okay? So what are the other nifty video features that this may offer that is better? If you are a D-bag who can't rack focus like me, who relies on autofocus, this autofocusing system is actually a lot faster than the A7 III. Even though the A7 III's autofocusing system is fantastic, this takes it up a notch. It locks on faster, it tracks more accurately, and it has touch track. And why does that benefit a videographer? It benefits the videographer because you have confidence, you know the camera is going to track. Whereas the A7 III, you kind of just either one, let it do its thing, which is actually very good at, it will just track, but there's still like this insecurity that it might decide to track on someone else if it's like multiple people in a scene. So a lot of times we'd go into flexible spot, you hit a spot on your camera screen, and it would track whatever is on that particular point of the screen versus the Alpha 6400 series, the 6600 series. An object on the screen, it will just track that object regardless of where it goes on the screen. And you know it's tracking because you see that there's a white box. You know it's locked on. You could, one, tell from the white box, and you could actually tell from the screen that it's in focus. Now, the common thing that I've always been aware of as Sony crop sensor shooter is that the 1080p is, well, has been very lackluster. We all know the 4K is great. This is right now filmed in 4K 24 at 6K readout to a 4K downsample, whatever it's called. And the Sony A7 III does the same thing. So I would say the 4K quality of the crop sensor Sony and the A7 III is relatively the same. You cannot tell the difference unless it's very low light, which the Sony A7III will prevail. Now, with the A6600, obviously you get the updated battery. Now the battery lasts as long as the A7III, unlike my A6400 now that is plugged in with the battery brick to make sure it doesn't die on me. You also get unlimited recording, unlike the Sony, which is capped at 30 minutes. This records unlimited, and from all I've seen, it does not overheat. I was able to shoot indoors on the A6400 here the other day at a corporate event for over 45 minutes, no problem. And the most common thing for me when I first started as a videographer was I had Alpha Nex 6, Alpha 6000, 6300, 6500, 6400, and now 6600, is that I always thought the 1080p was soft compared to, you know, the Sony A7S III, A7III, and now I'm finding that is not the case. And it is not because Sony improved the sensor and the capabilities. Maybe they did a little bit, but I think it's more so the lenses are available now for the Alpha 6000 series. You have the trinity of Sigma prime lenses, 60 millimeter, 30 millimeter, 56 millimeter f1.4, which are very sharp lenses. And on top of that, you have now affordable full frame lenses that you could also use on your crop sensor, thankfully to Sony's E-mount system. So with Sony's E-mount system, you're able to use full frame and crop sensor glass on all of their bodies. So you could actually take a 60 millimeter Sigma, which I'm using right now on this A6400, use it on the A7 III, which is full frame. Just it ends up being cropped in, so we have like about a 24 millimeter focal length, and then you end up having to shoot in video in APS-C mode on the A7 III versus instead of full frame. But in photo, if you want to do crop sensor, you lose out in the resolution, but you still get the full 4K or 5K readout. So in the end, the A7 III is actually still the more overall versatile video camera. So it looks like I just answered my own question again. I was about to say, I was literally going into this video thinking that I was going to say that the Alpha 6600 was going to be possibly the better video camera to get right now. But the only real benefits of the Alpha 6600 is the autofocus and the fact that you could shoot unlimited recording. And that is exactly why I actually got this for myself. There are some things that I am personally trying to push myself creatively. I feel like this autofocus system is going to help me do some pretty cool stuff in my future projects. This weekend, I'll be shooting another wedding, the Alpha 6 to test autofocus tracking, because there's a lot of shots that I try to do with A7 III that the autofocus would lock, and then as I go through a crowd of people or something, it will kind of like hunt back and forth. I had definitely tested the Alpha 6400 with more extreme autofocus tracking tests, and it had wonderful results. And now, I could have full confidence in a Z battery that I don't have to change out every 5 seconds, and the same autofocusing system, and actually I think is better than the Alpha 6400. And the 6600, I'm going to definitely try out to give you some footage for you guys. Now, one of the common, going back to the whole 1080p thing, 1080p for the crop sensor cameras have always been perceived to be a bit soft. And from my tests, from what I've seen, it is really more up to the lens more than it is the actual camera sensor itself. So as long as you have high quality glass or equivalent glass, so like right now, if I were to put this 24 millimeter GM on the Alpha 6600, you should get pretty good, decent equivalent quality of 1080p to the A7 III. And I actually had a chance to test it out earlier today, and I'll test it out again here for you to, let me know if you see the difference between the two footage samples. So this is the Alpha 6600 with the 24 millimeter GM in 1080 60 frames per second footage, which I'll probably end up putting it to 4K upscale for this YouTube video. But this is right now at shutter speed of 1/125, 1080 60 frames per second at f1.4 ISO 200, and the exposure is at 0. And maybe test out the IBIS as well. So with the 24 millimeter GM on a crop sensor, APS-C Alpha 6600, this is equivalent to 35 millimeter or so in full frame. And theoretically, if you multiply 24 times 1.5 times crop, you get 35 millimeters. So this should give you a 35 millimeter look on an APS-C camera. with the 24 millimeter lens on the APS-C camera. And to match this look and to match the depth of field, I will use the A7 III with a 35 millimeter full frame lens, and I'm going to do an aperture of f2 because f1.4 times 1.5 equals 2.1. So a full frame camera at 35 millimeters at around f2 should give you a similar look as a 24 millimeter GM lens on a 24 millimeter lens on a crop sensor lens at f1.4. Sorry if that confused you, but I'll show you in a second. And also you compare how the footage looks in terms of sharpness and all that stuff. Right now I have the A7 III with the 35 millimeter full frame lens at f2. And the focal length should look similar to what I had just shown you on the Alpha 6600. Now this is also in 1080, 60 frames per second at 1/125th of a shutter speed. I changed the ISO now to ISO 200 as well. So hopefully, it gives you a similar look. Let me know if you think the A7 III is still sharper in 1080 than the Alpha 6600. I'm going to take a look for myself, and I'm going to compare the results. This is the Sony Alpha 6400, which is the same sensor as Alpha 6600. 1080p, 60 frames per second, 1/125th of a shutter, f1.4 on the 16mm Sigma prime lens. ISO is about 200. Now I'm going to switch over to the A7 III with a 24mm G Master. This is the Sony A7 III with a 24mm G Master lens at f2. And the reason why I put it f2 is to match the same depth of field as the crop APS-C at f1.4. So is this more or less sharp than the Alpha 6600 or Alpha 6400 with equivalent focal length lens? Once again, 1080p, 1/125th of a second, f2, 200 ISO. "4K is no question that they're all the same, but we'll see. So if you're in a market for a Sony camera, and if you're a Canon shooter who's finally came to your senses and decided to switch to Sony, which you should have done 10 years ago, which should you pick? If you're a photographer, spend the extra $300-400, get the A7 III. There's some things to consider. That full frame lenses are a lot more expensive than crop sensor lenses. So there's that, but you do get better dynamic range. You do get the full frame sensor. You do get dual card slots. Yeah, it's overall just better photography camera. That does not mean that the Alpha 6600 is bad. It just means that the A7 III is that good. Now, if you're a videographer, if you're doing talking head stuff, if you're looking to get into YouTube, if you are looking to do videos like this, or even if you are looking to do professional work where you're filming another subject, the Alpha 6400 will do a good job. And actually, I just realized I'm still shooting this in 1080p. Let me switch over to 4K for the sharpness action. Because right now, I'm almost looking as bad as Canon footage, which is probably impossible, but almost there. All right, back to that 4K goodness for that YouTube algorithm action. But, I can honestly not, with a straight face, recommend the Alpha 6600 over an A7 III, especially now that the A7 III you could buy it at $1,600. Yes, the Alpha 600 does have better autofocus. Yes, you know, it has a flippy screen, but if you can pay the extra money to get the Alpha A7 III, unless you're just really starting off, you're poor, and you're trying to, you know, just get those first couple of gigs off Craigslist, shooting full day coverage. You know, you're trying to get your portfolio going, and you need the best possible cheap camera. The Alpha 600 is probably a good choice just because it is $300 cheaper. You could get a nice Sigma 30mm or Sigma 56mm lens for another $300 to $400, and then you could spend $1,800 on a very nice professional video setup that you could, you know, do talking head stuff like this. So yeah, if you let's say you buy the Alpha 600 for $1,400, you spend another $1,000, spending $2,400, you could have the Alpha 600 16mm Sigma f1.4, which I'm using right now, and you could tell it's a really good quality lens. 30mm f1.4 and a 56mm f1.4 for a total of $2,400, and you have a really legit setup for filmmaking and for photography. So if you are on a budget and you're starting off, probably the Alpha 600 APS-C could be the way to go, because you buy the A7 III, you know, you want to get some lenses, you know, you're left to maybe, you know, equivalent price, you're looking at maybe a Tamron 2875, which is also a great setup. So if I were to have my choice between an A7 III and a 2875mm Tamron versus an Alpha 6600 with 3 Sigma prime lenses, I would take the Alpha 600 and 3 Sigma prime lenses any day of the week. So, you know, just to get the equivalent setup and look, you know, in terms of lens quality of the Alpha 600, you do have to spend significantly more money with A7 III. And you could use the full frame E-mount glass on your crop sensor APS-C Sony. So in this case, I have a 35mm now, f1.8 full frame lens mounted onto the Alpha 600, and I will want to show you some example footage with this lens, considering you can get really close focusing with this lens, and the fact that you're on a crop sensor, you can get even closer than what the full frame sensor can do. So let me just show you an example of me just zooming into this YouTube douchebag setup I have going on here. And so let's see what I could do here. I'm going to tap to focus onto the Sony. Again, this is with the 35mm f1.8, which is a 50mm equivalent. I'm pretty much about 4 inches away, and it finally lost focus. No, yeah, it's losing focus. So look, this is pretty much with a 35mm f1.8 on APS-C, I can get about, let's see. Yep, I could get about 5 inches away from an object before losing focus on it, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to touch the lens, see if it will stay locked onto the lens as I push in, and lost focus. So I am about 4 inches or so away from the lens. Back into focus, and let's see if it will track the lens all the way back. See, that's the focus tracking I'm talking about. And no, it's not even a face. So yeah, so for my regular subscribers, I'm sorry I didn't really make too many jokes in this. I just wanted to get a lot of information out. You know, I will be trying out this Alpha 6600 more, a lot more this weekend while I shoot a wedding. Maybe even during the week too, just random stuff. But I like it, and I'm going to try some different things with the autofocusing system, see how much I like it. But I hope that this comparison has been helpful for any of you who is trying to make a purchase decision between the A7 III and a6600. I mean, when Sony dropped that price on A7 III, I think it's no-brainer that if you could just shell out the extra money for it, and the extra money for the lenses and stuff. But if you're really on a stiff budget and you want to get like the best possible thing you could get for under 2,500 bucks, you cannot go wrong with Alpha 6600 with the Sigma Trinity of lenses, 16, 30, and 56 millimeter f1.4, and you'll be set to go. So, yeah, until next time.